little while ago I made a top 5 albums of 2020 video, and you know what, I think it was pretty good. I'm pretty happy with what I put out, and most of what I said reflects my opinion now a few months later. That is, except for one thing. While I'm proud of the list I made, I'm disappointed that I didn't take more time to listen to more of the major releases of that year before I made the list. I missed out on some pretty great projects, a few of which I've put here. But really the biggest thing I missed out on was a little project called Punisher by an artist called Phoebe Bridgers, and it feels like nobody's really talked about it ever. It feels like nobody's heard. So I thought that I'd chip in a bit to the conversation and tell you why Punisher is absolutely perfect. I already showed the title card, I don't know why I'm doing it. Punisher is the second solo project by indie artist Phoebe Bridgers. It follows a fair number of other projects, from Phoebe's collaboration with Connor Oberst, an EP with Julian Baker and Lucy Dacus, her previous album Stranger in the Alps, and a handful of other singles and collaborations. The project has 11 songs totaling 40 minutes in length and follows a sound that includes genres such as indie, rock, folk, and even metal in certain portions. And while I'll get into this more later, the album has several prominent themes stemming throughout it. Either through deeply personal experiences to broad, overarching concepts, this album tackles broken relationships, depression, and discontentment, as well as moving on. These themes, coupled with the underlying sound composed mainly of guitars, other strings like violins, pianos, drums, and occasionally horns, with Phoebe doing most of the singing, occasionally bringing in other collaborators. And yeah, that's pretty much what this is. I think I've explained and maybe even over-explained what it is, so I think it's time we actually get into
1, 2, 3, 4.
Because it's really good. Yeah, I gotta agree with me here. I think this thing is pretty fantastic. But on a more serious note, from the slow, brooding instrumental opener DVD menu to the epic and apocalyptic I Know the End, it is one of the most consistently great and thoughtful albums I've heard. Speaking of these songs, let's talk about the individual tracks. The album starts off with the slow, melodic guitar and violin-led DVD menu. And while this being an instrumental track, there's not too much to say about it, it is definitely a fitting intro to the project. The beautiful melody leading the track, accompanied by odd vocal snippets, really reel you in and get you attuned to the subdued and low-key nature of the rest of the record. This is then followed by Garden Song, which is a similarly slow, guitar-led track where Phoebe's voice gets its first chance to really shine. And it's absolutely beautiful, Phoebe's delicate voice fading in with the instrumental to create this very tired and dreamy atmosphere while still remaining a captivating listen. And what partially makes this such an ear-catching track is Phoebe's lyrics and poetry. The song serves as a reflection on nostalgia and how your perception of the past will impact your worldview and future. Phoebe's fond perception of her past materializes in her present, with lyrics like this backing that up. It's an absolutely gorgeous track and a wonderful introduction to the poetic and thoughtful side of Punisher. Then comes the biggest song off the project, Kyoto. This is a full-on indie rock song with these rocking guitar riffs, blaring horns, and rhythmic drums leading the whole track. Lyrically, this song covers a lot of ground, being a reflection on Bridger's relationship with her father and her current state of unrest, all set over the city of Kyoto. And as fun as this song sounds, it really goes deep into these topics. The opening few lines and the chorus blatantly state the discontent and unrest Phoebe feels in her everyday life, going place to place but never feeling truly satisfied. Then it introduces the idea of her complicated relationship with her father, who was absent for a good chunk of her life. And it shows him trying to make amends for what he's done, calling her, writing her letters, and trying to reconnect with his son as well as her. And after all this, Phoebe is left conflicted. She can't forgive him for giving her such a rough childhood, but doesn't want him to be left out of her life completely. After everything, he's still her dad. And with the way the instrumental builds up with the second chorus and the final refrain of "I'm a liar" repeated over and over, you get a real sense of the emotional gut punch that the album's gonna be delivering over and over again from here on out. Then comes the title track, which is a bit of a strange moment on the album. This is one of the most personal songs on an already extremely personal record. It's partly a tribute to the late indie artist Elliott Smith, but also partway about depression. It features some of the most literal lyrical moments, with Phoebe going into detail about the neighborhood she lived in. It details the fact that she lived literally down the street from Smith, who she's a huge fan of. And backed by these delicate violins and keys, she goes into her anxieties about becoming a punisher. Oh, now would be a good time to explain what that means, by the way. Phoebe describes a punisher as someone who is really sweet and nice, but talks to you for an uncomfortable amount of time and maybe about uncomfortable things. And it makes you just want to escape from them. And Phoebe applies this to herself and says that it's good that she never met Smith, because if she did, she'd just be a punisher to him. It's one of the saddest songs on the record, which is already full of incredibly depressing moments, but it's also an important song, I think, showing Phoebe at her peak of self-aware storytelling. Next is Halloween, which is the start of a handful of tracks that deal with different lost relationships. The instrumental features these minimalistic, plucked guitars, which turn into these enveloping bits of sound that swallow you whole whenever the chorus comes around. This building instrumental sets the stage for Phoebe to take on a very emotional and pronounced voice, with her begging her partner to make things work out. Going hand in hand with the setting of Halloween, this song is all about trying to become someone else to make a relationship work out. Phoebe is watching as her love life is falling apart, and in a last-ditch effort to revive it, tries to change who she is. The track fades out with the chorus, with Phoebe, accompanied by Connor Oberst, gently repeating, "I'll be whatever you want," over and over. Chinese Satellite comes next on the track list, and this is one that I think doesn't get enough praise. While most of the track is guitar-based, the choruses break out into these absolutely gorgeous violins that melt in and pronounce the absolute beauty in Phoebe's voice. And in the last few verses, these pumping drums come in, making the track more dynamic and full-sounding. The final verse in particular is one of the most beautiful moments on the whole record, with every element coming together perfectly to form a near transcendent experience. This, in tandem with the actual meaning of the track, makes for a shining moment on the record. The track is all about Phoebe wanting to believe in a more magical and spiritual world, despite being let down by it constantly. Moments like these show Phoebe's yearning for some greater purpose in life, but she never finds any. She desperately hopes that one day something magical or larger than life will just appear and sweep her away, but deep down she knows that's not going to happen. The next track, Moonsong, continues Halloween in the group of songs about relationships. This is another heartbreaker of a track, this time being backed by another basic guitar and drum arrangement. The slow, melancholic feel of the track translates to the story it tells, which is all about Phoebe in an unhealthy, toxic relationship, but not really wanting to get out of it. While the person she's dating isn't a bad person necessarily, the relationship is still just not healthy for either of them. But despite this, Phoebe feels so attached to the person that she'd happily give up everything about herself for them. And as Phoebe's vocals pick up at the end of the track, you feel the full weight of what she's saying, and it seems like something great has just come crashing down on her. Welcoming us into the last few songs of the album is Savior Complex, which kind of reverses the roles seen in the last track. This time, instead of being in a relationship where Phoebe feels she has to keep doing more and more for the other because she's so lesser, she's in a place where she feels like she's responsible for her partner. As the title says, she has a kind of savior complex. She feels like she is picking up the other person's life. It runs this story through a very dreamy filter with abstract poetic lyrics and another dreamy guitar instrumental that melts into Phoebe's voice. It makes this track more of a textural experience than some of the others, as layered group vocals come in along with dreamy, subdued violins. The track doesn't even end with a fully completed chorus or refrain. Instead, it cuts off Phoebe's singing, playing out on some beautiful violins that quickly fade. Contrasting this comes the last relationship-based track, I See You. It's this upbeat, hopeful-sounding track that makes a use of an escalating guitar, rhythmic drumming, and beautiful layered vocals. And while still being a fairly sad track, the song displays a ray of hope not often found many other places on the album. The song goes over depression and how Phoebe found an escape from the malaise of daily life in a now-gone relationship. She says that while she normally feels like a dead man walking, when she's with her partner, in this case the song is based on her real relationship with her drummer, she feels something. She feels alive again. And while the sad reality is that the relationship is over now, Phoebe at least now knows that there's something out there beyond the monotony of day-to-day life. Now we get to what may be the oddest change of pace on the record, but not in a bad way. Track 10, Graceland 2, is a track mostly based on the banjo, which appears on, I'm pretty sure, no other track. It covers a woman leaving home to be with and support her friends, and while it's a very melancholic, depressive song, it's also another ray of hope off the album. It's not the most upbeat track, sure, but it also showcases what I said to be a major theme of the album earlier: moving on. It pictures the protagonist moving forward from whatever mistakes or issues they've had in the past, and with the beautiful refrain of "I would do anything for you" at the end, with gorgeous group vocals by the other members of Boy Genius. It's an extremely interesting and memorable track, which says a lot because it comes right before what I think is the best off the project, I Know the End. I Know the End might be my favorite album closer of all time. I'm not quite totally sure yet, but right now, recording this, it seems right. At the start, it's not necessarily that different from the rest of the album. In fact, it's quite similar to Garden Song in a lot of ways, having this dreamy atmosphere and focusing heavily on nostalgia. But then around 2 minutes into the song, the violins just come fading in, and Phoebe's verse starts, and you think maybe the violins will play it out for another slow burn off the album. But then you look, and there are still 4 minutes left on the song, and then the drums kick back in, and Phoebe comes back in with the violins to deliver the best verse on the whole album. And as she continues to sing, the drums slowly build, layering on top of each other. New elements get added into the instrumental. You feel like something big is coming. You feel like something's about to happen. That the horns kick in. Everything is just coming together. And with one hollowed refrain of "The end is here," the instrumental kicks into full gear, taking over everything. And you think that maybe this is the best part, maybe this is the part that the album will coast off of. But then the apocalyptic, distorted guitars and horns kick in, and then God. And as the track finally finishes off, the screams and instrumentals finally fading out, we're left with one thing. After all that, Phoebe is still there, quietly breaking down to herself, accompanied by nothing else. It's genuinely the perfect end to a record. And that's Punisher. I hope I did it justice, and if this hasn't convinced you yet, go listen to it right after finishing this. There's only like a couple seconds left. It's in my top 10 favorite albums at the moment, and despite it already being incredibly popular, I still think it needs more attention. It's also worth noting that my interpretations of the lyrics here are not by any means the only possible ones. I mainly tried to stick to what has been said by Phoebe Bridgers to be the meanings, but even then, death of the author and all that stuff, I think that's it. This is a fantastic record, and I hope you have a nice day.
On a flatbed, you should see it. I mean thousands. I grew